Okay, so for this first rule comes up all the time with consulting clients on our calls. They'll say, hey, should I mandate that a cleaner comes in? And I am a hard no on this. And part of the reason is that at the end of this little spiel, I will address what the real problem is with a rule. I will give you a rule that will help answer this issue, but I also want to talk about the philosophy around why you would not have a cleaner in. So I think a lot of my consulting clients want a cleaner in because they've gotten like a 4-month, 5-month booking and they're not going to have eyes on the property, and that makes them nervous. So if they mandate a cleaner in there, then they will have someone from their own team on the property that can then report back. So I don't like this for a number of reasons. First, because you can address it a different way, which I will get to, but more importantly, I am not only a midterm rental host, but I am also a midterm rental tenant. And I can tell you that if I am renting someone's property for 3 or 4 months and they mandate that I have a cleaner, I am not psyched about that, because I think no matter how many times they tell me that it's free to me, the cost is ultimately going to get passed on to me in some way under the booking. Or I would just rather have a discount than have you pay for the cleaner and then pass that cost on to me, even though you're saying it's not. And the reason for that is because I'm a clean person. So I am pretty tidy and I don't need a cleaner. I make my own bed every day. I clean out my kitchen every day. I have a certain way that I like my bathroom to look, too much head hair in the drain. But beyond that, I'm a clean person and I don't need a cleaner, and I certainly don't want to pay for it. And since there's no way to convince me that that cost isn't getting passed on to me, that is an unattractive feature when it is being mandated for me. So that is reason number one. And before I get into the second reason why I don't like a cleaner, I want to say congratulations if you have a 3 or 4 month rental and you ultimately have this problem. It is a good problem to have and there is an easy solution for it, but it's a good thing to have a longer rental. It cuts down on your vacancies, and especially as we go into November and December, which for most of the United States is going to be the hardest time to rent out your property. That's not necessarily true if you're in Florida, but kind of for everywhere else, maybe Hawaii, maybe some big cities, but really November and December create a lot of challenges to get your property rented because of the holidays. So if you have this problem and you're watching this video in October of 2024 and you have a long-term renter in there, this is great news. So the second reason why I don't like the cleaner is, what if something happens? What if something walks off? Now, I don't know if my husband misplaced it. I don't know if I misplaced it. I don't know if the cleaner took it, but the cleaner is not someone that I have any relationship with or that I have signed off on. And so if I have a personal item that disappears, then it becomes a conversation between the guest and the host and the cleaner, what happened. And so something that's innocent, like something misplaced, could leave a bad taste in everyone's mouth. Something that's less innocent, you might start to have a push and pull between who's going to pay for that. So that's the second reason why I don't like it. The third reason why I don't like it is because, let's say the cleaner comes into the property and the property looks bad, like they've moved furniture into the living room, they have a bunch of junk everywhere. Just in general, it is less tidy than you would like it to be. Well, what are you going to do about that? The renter has every right to live in any kind of condition that they want until they turn it back over to you. And then at that point, you can have a conversation about a deposit or making yourself whole if there's been some kind of disturbance. But if you just see video or photos of the place and it looks a little messier than you would like, there's really no recourse for you. You've just upset yourself, but there's no good solution for what you can tell the tenant to do. Okay, and then the fourth and final reason why I do not like the cleaner speaks to the rule that I'm about to tell you, which is that you can enter the property at any time with sufficient notice. In most states, the sufficient notice as the landlord host is 24 hours. In some states, it is 48 hours. So you want to write this into your midterm rental listing, regardless of the platform that you're on. You want to put somewhere in the house rules, landlord host, representative of landlord host has the right to enter the property with 24 hours notice. And you might say that and then put the end of that sentence or have the end of that sentence be per Colorado law, per California law, per New York law, right? So landlord host or landlord host representative has the right to enter the property with 24 hours written notice per Colorado law. It gives it an official sound to it, so it doesn't just sound like you're a creeper landlord that's going to be in their business, but you have the right to be in that property at any time. There's no reason to hire a cleaner because it is part of your right as a landlord in every single state to have access to your property, even if you have a tenant in there. And if you're really worried about this, like you don't like the idea of just saying, hey, I'm going to come in and check on you, you always could say, I am going to do a smoke alarm or carbon monoxide check, which at least in the state of Colorado, you do have to check annually, and it can't be the tenant checking it and telling you it's okay. You physically have to go in and check it. So even if you did it 4 months ago for a different tenant, you could just kind of fib and say, hey, it's the annual check for the new tenant and get eyes on your property without having a cleaner come in. Before we get to rules 2 and 3, I am Erin Spradlin. I am a midterm rental consultant. I have had my own midterm rentals since 2017, which is when Denver changed their short-term rental regulation into midterm rentals, or, into a non-primary residence. So basically you couldn't do a short-term rental on something that wasn't your primary residence in Denver in 2017. Well, we had all these furnished properties, so we had to pivot into midterm rentals, which is why I've had this experience since 2017. The good news is we love it. You should love it. They're actually quite easy to do. Even our properties where we could do short-term rentals, so in other locations outside of Denver, we still do midterm rentals because it is just our preference. Also, I have written 3 books on midterm rentals. They are available on Amazon, and I am a consultant for people that are interested in midterm rentals. This whole channel is about education and self-education for being a landlord, either in the long-term unfurnished space or the midterm rental space, because I really think using a property manager for a midterm or a long-term rental doesn't make sense anymore. Once you get your first rental under you, you'll see it's pretty easy, and you will have access to technology on the internet and tools that people didn't have in the 80s, 90s. That's why it made sense to have property management back then. Doesn't make sense now. So again, I'm Erin Spradlin. Welcome to the channel if you are new here. Let's get into the second rule for midterm rentals that you can write in to protect yourself. One other housekeeping note, if you feel like you've learned something so far, please like this channel. If you want more content like this, please subscribe. Later in the season, I'm going to do a lot more content around how to rent your place in slow season, since we are entering it, and that might be a reason to subscribe. Okay, so now let's talk about the second rule that you can write into your midterm rental documentation to protect yourself and to protect your property. It shows up different ways in Airbnb and Zillow, and I'll talk about what that looks like, but it's something that I've noticed on the clients where I'm co-hosting. They've bought the mentoring package, so I am there with them for their first tenant and have set things up, so I am seeing a lot of the communication that comes in. So the first thing that we're seeing on Airbnb is that someone might rent the place and then someone else entirely shows up. Now, I find this to be a problem for all sorts of reasons. First being that we make some assumptions around how a 20-year-old would act in our property versus how a 50-year-old would act. So if their mom is doing the booking, we need to know if it's the mom that's showing up or if it's a 20-year-old showing up. If someone is subleasing on behalf of someone else, like if it's a corporation that works with laborers or traveling nurses or insurance claims, we want to know that as well. So the way that we're going to write this in will help fix that problem. And then on Zillow, what I'm seeing a lot are companies that are coming in that are saying, hey, we're midterm rental property management companies, or we're Airbnb property management companies. We want to take the lease for like a year and let's work something out. And for Zillow, I don't love that. And the reason why I don't love that is because if you're priced high enough, no property manager should be able to come in, take your rental, put their cream on top of your cream on top of a normal long-term unfurnished rental rate and make enough money to make that business lucrative. So with Zillow, I don't like to have people coming in and subleasing, even if it's a midterm rental property management company, because based off the numbers and what I want to make, I don't think that they have enough room to make money on that to make it worth their while. And then when they're not getting the rents, they're going to start to get desperate and start to rent to tenants that I'm not necessarily happy about or that I would rent to myself. So in Zillow, that's usually what it looks like. And then on Airbnb, sometimes one person will book and someone else will show up. So the way to fix this is to write in your rules, anyone 18 plus staying 5 or more consecutive nights must be disclosed. On Airbnb, what this looks like is, you know, someone rents and you just say, hey, I just want to make sure that you saw this bullet point because people don't always, and we just need clarity on who is staying in the place. And they may ghost you. If they ghost you, that means that they weren't going to tell you that the 18-year-old was actually going to show up, or a boyfriend that they didn't disclose was going to show up. So you just want to know exactly who is going to stay in the place, and that's a professional way of communicating that request. On Zillow, I write in the exact same language, but then when I get those email requests from a midterm rental property management company, I just say no. And you'll actually see too that Zillow is really starting to shut down these requests. So Zillow often will say, you know, this user has been removed from the platform because Zillow also doesn't want them to do that. But for me, I just don't allow it, and I write it into my documentation, both in my lease and in my welcome doc. And just so you know, if you have two documents like this, like a welcome doc and a lease, just also write into the lease that the lease usurps anything in the welcome documentation. So if there's any confusion, you are saying the lease is the end all be all. Now you may also want to write that, you may alternately, not also, but you may alternately want to write that into the welcome doc. You may want to say the welcome doc usurps the lease. The reason why you would do that is whichever one is more clear to you and is more specific to exactly what you want. Now this is probably going to be the welcome doc, but that assumes that you're a good writer and that also you have all the legalese built in. Since I don't have confidence in myself for that, I make the lease usurp the welcome doc. Okay, and our third and final rule is about costs, and these costs have to do with locksmiths, light bulbs, and batteries. So the reason why I throw batteries in there is because often your Wi-Fi lock is tied to a battery and there will be a lot of beeps before that thing dies, but if it's not their problem, sometimes they ignore it. So I say batteries, light bulbs, and locksmith costs are the responsibility of the tenant. And again, I write this into the house rules. So the locksmith is going to be the really important one because we don't want someone coming in and letting that lock go dead because they've ignored the beeping battery because they're not worried about the cost of getting that replaced. So we just say right off the bat, if locksmith has to come in, the tenant has to pay it. The battery is kind of the same issue. We want them to not ignore that issue or wait for you to respond to get the batteries in. So we just say, hey tenant, it's your responsibility to replace the batteries. And then finally with light bulbs, I tell them that they have to replace them because again, I don't want to have a lot of tenant contact, and I don't think tenants want to have a lot of contact either. I actually think all the parties are the happiest if they're not having a lot of contact. And the way to do this is to set up your rental correctly in the beginning on the platforms and in the first, you know, in your intake when they're interested in your property, but also their first week. After that, you really shouldn't be talking to each other a lot if the property is running well. And so that light bulb just says right up front, hey, if this happens, it's your responsibility. You need to go out and take care of it. And with items like this, tenants typically get pissed if they find out after the fact, after they've rented, and then the rules have changed. That's when they're not happy. But if you set the standard up front, they tend to be totally fine with it. So those are like 3 of my 10 best rules for keeping yourself safe. If you are new to midterm rentals and you're kind of curious about who might be renting your property, maybe you have someone secured right now, or maybe you're just in the beginning stages of research. If that's you, then I recommend checking out this video because this video talks about all the different tenant types that might be interested in your property. I know that there's a big emphasis on traveling nurses and insurance carriers, but that's a really small pool of the midterm rentals, especially when we think midterm rentals are going to grow so much the next 5 years. Suggest checking out that video because it will help you understand who potentially could be coming into your property and how to position for them.